Okay, and we are online. Good afternoon, evening, morning to everybody. It's actually really cool to see the comments coming in on the YouTube feed with where everyone is from. Keith, yeah, there's always time to grab a beer. That's fine. Yeah. Trev from Australia, awesome. We managed to hit Australia. Good stuff. Cape Town, excellent. We're definitely getting the global element going on this class. So yes, happy Saturday, everyone. I hope you've had fun this week with your homework, and I hope you're looking forward to now finding out why we sent you off to take lots and lots of photos. Moving the mouse around. There we go. Okay, so without further ado, we will get going. Oh, that was not the slide that's supposed to come up. That's I clicked the wrong button, didn't I? Where were we? There we go. Session 2. Better. Let's do session 2.
After a quick review of session 1.
Right, I hope everyone got that. Any questions? Good? No? Right. So this evening we're gonna talk a little bit through a little bit about GUI. We're going to then talk about Addysoft Metashape, which is the software that we use for the photogrammetry. We're going to have a look at a couple of other things that we have to download and use to make the thing work properly, and then we're going to show you how to take the imagery that you've got and make it better, basically. Well, not make it better, how to actually turn that into the photogrammetry models. So what the first parts, which is what we call aligning the photos, and then we're going to look at a thing called building the dense cloud. Right, let's there we go. All right, so I'm going to let Kees talk to you a little bit about GUI, and over to you, Kees.
Thanks, John. So of course we're focusing on photogrammetry here, but as most of you probably know, both John and I are instructors for Global Underwater Explorers, GUE. And we always like to throw in a couple of plugs here because we think GUE is such a cool organization, and it's really enabled both of us to get where we are today and to understand diving and photogrammetry to the degree that we can actually go and teach it. So GUE is an organization. We have a couple of different programs. We do have a recreational program that's like most other agencies, sort of introductory program. We can take a diver from off the street and then build them up through a series of courses. Recently, through a lot of hard work from some of our instructors, we've fleshed out our recreational program over the course of the last couple of years. So now we have a series of courses that lets recreational divers learn everything from the very basics through basic triox and trimix training, navigation and rescue, and so on. So if there are classes that you're interested in taking and you'd like to take them from a really skilled instructor who has a focus on sort of exploration and conservation and really high quality dive skills, then you can take those through GUE. Now, we also, of course, have our foundational program, which introduces non-GUE divers introduces non-GUE divers to GUE training. And then, of course, our sort of flagship courses that we sort of originally became famous for, the technical, that's deep diving courses in cave and / overhead training. All of these classes are designed to build up divers that are very solid, that work really well in a team, and that are able to use their dive skills to do whatever it is that they want to. For John and myself, we both really enjoy project diving, and of course, in particular, photogrammetry. So that's where we put forth sort of our efforts. That's where we apply our dive skills and a lot of our time and money. But you can use the same skills for whatever it is that you find interesting. If you're interested in reefs, or if you're interested in cave diving, or if you're interested in conservation projects. All of that starts with a solid foundation of skills. So it's my little spiel on GUE. And if you have any questions or you're interested in the GUE course, reach out to either John or myself. We both travel, or we can put you in touch with somebody local who can take care of you. So after we've gone through our plug, we can start talking about photogrammetry and last session's homework. So last session, we asked you to find a suitable object to model, and a lot of people posted really interesting objects in the Facebook group, and hopefully you had a chance to review that, because even if you didn't post your model, maybe you got a good sense of what maybe is a good object or a bad object to try as your first go round. Now, of course, we want to be able to model a wide variety of things. So that's, there's approaches for us to model things that aren't ideal, but for your first go round, it's a lot easier to pick something good. So I hope you picked something good, and if it doesn't work out, you can always pick something again. For that homework, we wanted to prepare our area, make sure that we had a good environment, because that can be helpful for creating the model as well, and take between about 50 and 70 photos of the object. And I'm sure if you're here, you've heard about some of our projects that involve thousands or tens of thousands of photos. So, the question, if you've got the question, can I take more photos? The answer is absolutely yes, but we're trying to keep the processing times down for these introductory models, so that we don't find that we made a mistake 3 or 4 days after we started processing. This is going to be especially important because we have our next session tomorrow morning. So this evening's homework, we need to be sure that we can complete it in a reasonable amount of time so it's ready for the presentation tomorrow. Then, of course, we asked everybody to participate in the Facebook group, because it's fun to see what everybody's modeling, and also it's useful as a learning tool to see what other people are coming up with. I'm going to hand it back over to John to talk a little bit about modeling and the software that we're going to use to stitch the photos that we took together into something that's a little bit more fun.
Yeah, so here you go. I cheated. This is the homework that I did for the last session. It's significantly sped up, and I broke all of the rules by picking something that was curvy and shiny, mostly to show you what would happen if you do make that mistake. Yeah, let's move on from that. Okay, so the first thing that we now need to do today is we need to download this wonderful thing called Addysoft Metashape. Addysoft are a great company to work with. They're super helpful when we ask them questions, when we have problems. Most of the time, anyway. Sometimes they're scratching their hair as well and going, "Yeah, I don't know what's going on." But most of the time, they can come back fairly quickly with responses to issues. But the great thing is that despite it being commercial software, they have a 30-day free trial, and that is fully functional, including save. So that means that for 30 days, you can use it as if you had a license. And then, should you decide that you do like doing this, they have a very reasonably priced option, which is the $179 standard version. That just to be clear about that, that's $179 plus applicable taxes, which get added on by the Addysoft system when you order the software. I would advise not at this point in time ordering the software. Instead, get in touch, because I'm a reseller for Addysoft, and for anyone who's doing this online class, we're offering a 10% discount to anyone who does the online class. There is then a second version, the professional version of the software, that retails at $3,499. A small step up from $179, I think you'll all agree. This is basically designed as a proper survey grade software. So the price matches the concept of what you're actually going to be doing with it. Luckily, for most of what we do for both topside and underwater photogrammetry, we don't need the professional version features. And in fact, Kees and I both started and worked for many years with the standard version before having to get hold of the professional version for the bigger projects. So for some of the bigger projects where we have a lot of divers or a lot of data sets that we're trying to link together, or for things where we need real georeferencing, then the professional version is required, unfortunately. But luckily for most of the stuff, and certainly whilst we're playing and learning how to use Metashape, you don't need that professional version. So as I said, if anyone is interested in purchasing the software at this point, drop me an email. Otherwise, feel free to just use the 30-day free trial and then get in touch should you decide that you want to carry on afterwards. How have I done this? That hasn't linked through. Hang on, sorry. Obviously, I've set up my display wrong. Add screen 2. There we go. Okay. We can do that. And I'll drop that down there. Sorry, just get this all set up. Right. Okay, so we have Addysoft, my Addysoft window here. The first thing we're going to need to do is we need to do we need to change the preferences. So we need to go to Tools and Preferences, and this will bring up the preference window. And there's 3 sets of preferences that we need to change. So the first set, as you can see on the slide here, is the GPU settings. So if I look at the GPU, here is some important things. If you have an external or additional graphics card in your computer, put a tick in here. If you see a graphics card here with the word Intel in it, then that is not an external graphics card. That's part of your main processor for your computer. So do not tick that. That will just slow things down. The other thing is, I've seen quite a lot of people having issues, particularly in the last class. If you see where it says CUDA on my screen here, if you see it saying OpenCL here, we've been seeing quite a few people having issues with that. So try it with it ticked. If it doesn't work, then untick it and try again. What the GPU does, the GPU is the graphics card for your machine, and it will do its best to basically speed up the process. Okay, the next thing that we look at is under the appearance tag. And if we come down here, you can see down here this thing marked region. And I think as a default, it's something like 83% on the transparency. Bring that back down to somewhere around 10%. The idea behind that is that it means that you can actually see the region. And we'll tell you what that means a bit later in the in this presentation. The final thing is on advanced. Make sure that keep key points and keep depth maps are both clicked. That will make your life a lot easier going forwards. And then you can just apply that and then click OK. Okay. Missed one step. If you have selected a graphics card, then you can you can click on the button marked, or you turn it off where it says use CPU when performing GPU accelerated tasks. Okay. Again, that basically means that your main processor is not involved in the processing of the data when the graphics card is running. Okay, let's.
Just one quick note there, John.
Yeah.
An issue that we had in the last class that I dropped in the YouTube chat. If you are using a Mac, you may find the preferences in a different spot under Metashape menu and then Preferences. So if you're having trouble finding it and you're on a Mac, you should be able to find the same thing in there. All the same stuff applies, though.
Yeah, so okay, so there we go. So for Mac users, it's under the Metashape menu, so that's the top left menu. But for PC users, it's under the Tools menu, and then it's Preferences for both. Okay, good stuff. For PC users, there's a couple of other things that you need to you want to download. So the Mac guys can switch off for a minute. The first thing here is a thing called the OpenSSL library, and we will make sure that link to this goes up in the Facebook group. You need to install OpenSSL in order to be able to export your model later in the process. I think, though, I've just remembered, I think you have to download, though, OpenSSL 1.0.2 to make it work with Sketchfab. We should make a note of that and make sure that we will make sure that we send you the link to the correct version for that. It is a little bit. Sometimes the install doesn't work very well, so if you try it and it fails, then just run the installer again, and then generally it works. I don't know why, but there's something not quite right about the installer. These are not things that Kees and I have any control over, unfortunately, though. These are just things that are out there. The next thing is, if you are using video, if you want to try and import video to make your models, and you are using a PC, again, Mac users don't need to do this, then you want to install the K-Lite codec pack, and as again, we will stick the links up in the Facebook group with this. The point of this is it basically gives you the codecs needed to be able to convert the video files into stills files. So do not worry about the fact that this website looks like it's been made by a 5-year-old with access to Comic Sans font. That's just how it is. That is actually the official website that you need to download it from. But do also be aware that there's quite a lot of crazy adverts and stuff like this that say start download. Ignore all of those. You want to click where it says server 1 down here next to HTTPS. Okay. That's the only place to get that link from, and I'll try and send you the direct link to that to get that download. Okay, so once you've downloaded that lot and installed it, you now can start looking at getting your models ready to make. What you'll find is, at the moment, if you've never made any photogrammetry, you could just get away with making a folder called Photogrammetry and then putting all of your files into that Photogrammetry document, into that Photogrammetry folder, and there won't be any issue. I know that that's how I started. I'm pretty sure that's how Kees started, and we very rapidly realized why that was a really stupid idea. And the reason it's a really stupid idea is at some point you're going to come back to try and work out what on earth you were doing with your data, and you've now got dozens and dozens of files all in the same folder with no way of knowing which project it's attached to. So something that's really good is to build a good data structure. So in this case, you have a photogrammetry document folder, and then as a subfolder of that, we see here PB4Y. So this is one of Kees's projects from Seattle. And then we can see here other folders. So he's got dated folders. I'm guessing that these will be the images that were taken on those dates, and then we've got the processing files here. I quite like to stick all of the processing files into their own folder as well, but you'll come up with your own way of doing it, but do make sure that you put some effort into making sure that you have these folders sensibly sorted. It says there at the bottom, move any images that are not used for the model somewhere else. Again, this will make your life a lot easier when you come to trying to find stuff in the future. Once you've got your files into a decent folder, then we can start looking at how to do the basic processing. Right, let me switch the screens back. Okay. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm actually gonna pretend that we've got a new project here. So we've got our Addysoft window, and the first thing we need to do is actually import our photos. What you'll find is you need to get really familiar with this menu item here called Workflow. If you click on the Workflow, you'll see two options here: Add Photos and Add Folder. This is one of the reasons why keeping only the photos for a given project in one folder is really useful, because you can then just add that folder. If you've not done that, you can do Add Photos. So in this case, I'm going to go into my online photogrammetry class, my Velaset file. I've got images, and I can then click and select them all and go open. And it's going to populate my Photos tab at the bottom here with all my images. Okay, so that's how we bring in the images. Yeah, that's how we bring in the stills images. I will now let Kees talk a little bit about video. There we go. Okay, Kees.
Yeah, so the process of bringing the process of bringing video in is pretty similar to photos. Basically, we're going to go through the same process as we would as if our camera was sort of taking a picture about every 1 second if it was on an intervalometer, but instead we're just going to take video. Now, Addysoft Metashape is not actually able to process video directly. Everything needs to be processed from photos. So the first step in video processing is basically to convert the video that you have into photos. The advantage that we have when processing video is that we can opt to take more frames out of the video if we need to, whereas if we've taken still photos, that's not an option. So we can do this either automatically or manually. The manual process is pretty straightforward. You play the video and take screenshots along the way. The disadvantage of this is that you usually don't get the exact right resolution from your video, and that can affect the quality of your result. So what we would recommend is that generally you capture these automatically. There is an import tool under the in Addysoft Metashape that allows you to import the video directly, and we'll be able to do a little demo of that. The disadvantage to video processing in comparison to photos is that generally the resolution is not as good, and because the resolution is not as good, it makes it more challenging for Metashape to work with. John, if you wanted to do a quick import video here.
So
we go.
Go on, Kees. You can talk.
Yeah,
I'll just.
We can go to File, Import, and then Import Video at the very bottom. We'll get this dialog. We can open that video up from wherever it's located, and we get this dialog box here. Now, keep in mind that all of these the photos that it pulls out of this video are going to be put into the chunk that's active. So on the side there, you see we've only got one chunk on the left. It's going to drop those in there. If you've already got photos in there, it's going to add them on top of that. So I would recommend that you have an empty chunk or a new project when you're working on this. So the first thing that we're going to do is select an output folder. This is where it's going to put the stills once it's done. So we build up a new folder for that. Here, John's named his video grabs. He's putting a new folder in there in order to keep things nice and clean. And we can select that and select folder. You can see the output folder is now filled out, so it has somewhere to put these stills once it's done. The file name template you can leave alone, or you can make an adjustment. It's going to replace that small like curly brace file num with the photo number. So the first one's going to be 0, then 1, then 2, and so on. And you can change the name frame to something that's more useful, like in this case it might be moped or something. An important note, though, and this is probably the most important step in this process, is to adjust your frame stop. Frame stop is the number of frames between each frame capture. So if it's set to 1, it's going to capture every single frame. And even on a very short video, say a minute or 2, that's 60 frames per second times 60 seconds per minute. You're going to end up with thousands and thousands of photos, and it's going to be impossible for you to process. We had a number of people make this mistake the first go around, so we can learn from that. Generally, we recommend about 1 to 2 seconds between images, which means if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, your frame step would be 30. If you are shooting at 60 frames per second, your frame step would be 60. If you want to capture a couple more photos, you can lower this. If you want to capture fewer photos, you can increase this. Keep in mind that you can always come back and redo this process and add photos in. It's a little bit more involved, but it is entirely possible. Then we're going to want to do start from, and that's set to default at 0, 0. And then the easiest thing to do for the end at is just to scrub through the video to the end and select current position. You may find that you can't select the end of the video until you hit play on the left-hand side there. So if you need to do that, you can. Once we've got all of our settings, I always recommend just do a once-over, make sure that we haven't done anything silly, especially with the frame step, and then go ahead and click OK. And then Addysoft is going to pull all the frames out for you.
I just mentioned at this point, what I find is that PC users don't necessarily need to put in the end value all the time, but Mac users do seem to. There's something weird goes wrong on Mac, so it's a good habit to get into to do that regardless.
Yeah, I also, if the K-Lite codec pack hasn't been installed properly, you won't be able to play the video there, and the processing will fail. So by virtue of sort of hitting that play button and making sure that it works, you'll sort of guard yourself against failure in that area. Okay, so if we're processing videos, we do this process of turning the video into stills. If we've got stills, then we're just going to work with the stills. So either way, at this point, we're sort of at the same spot, which is with a bunch of still frames in our chunk, and we're ready to do our first step in creating our 3D model. That is aligning images. So the alignment phase is pretty straightforward. Basically, what it's going to try to do is take all of the information from the photos that you've taken and figure out where each one of those pictures was taken relative to each other. Addysoft refers to the photos as cameras, so you might see that in the software, and we'll usually refer to them in the same way. So if you think, I don't have more than one camera, realize that's actually just the number of photos that you have. So in the align phase, we've got a lot of different options to choose from, and it's important that we choose the right ones. Otherwise, we're going to end up with either a really low quality result, or we're going to end up taking more time than necessary. Adjusting the accuracy is going to adjust the amount of time that Metashape takes to process your photos. With higher accuracy, generally comes a better result, and with lower accuracy comes a worse one. That being said, there are significant diminishing returns here. We usually like to start out on accuracy medium, and if it doesn't work quite right and you want your computer to try a little bit harder, we can jump up to accuracy high. Accuracy highest is going to take a preposterous amount of time and generally doesn't give you any better result, so we would not recommend that. Accuracy low sometimes can work, and it's going to move pretty quickly, but it doesn't generally give great results, and accuracy lowest almost never gives good results. So basically the highest and the lowest are not recommended. Usually I just stick with medium. You can bump up or bump down depending on if you need a higher quality or you need to try to run it a little bit faster, with the understanding that your result is going to be a little bit different each way. Generic pre-selection is sort of like doing a quick pass. So we usually like to start with this checked, so accuracy on medium and generic pre-selection checked. What that's going to do is do a quick pass over all your photos and try to determine if any of them are likely to match up in the first place. So it just sort of goes through and it says, hey, all of these photos look like they're probably taken from roughly the same spot. So we're going to try to match them. And it's going to throw out some of the ones that it thinks it's unlikely to match up. It's not going to get it right all the time, especially if your data is not perfect. So if you check that, basically you're going to sacrifice a little bit of your quality in order for it to move a little bit faster. And if your image data is good, you're going to sacrifice a very, very small amount of quality in order for much faster processing times. Usually what we do is we'll start on accuracy medium with generic preselection checked, and then we'll move on. If that doesn't work, we'll uncheck generic preselection, but keep accuracy on medium. Reference pre-selection is something sort of an advanced topic. It can basically, it's like telling Metashape, giving it a little bit of extra information. So in this case, you can see in this example on this slide, there's a sequential. That's sort of like saying, hey, I'm going to give you this little tip on these photos. I took them all one right after another. That can dramatically reduce processing time, but it can also really mess up Metashape. So I would say let's process without that checked for the first time through, and you can mess around with that once you've tried a little bit harder. Or excuse me, once you want to try a little bit harder on something and experiment a little bit. If we are on the Align Photos dialog, we can open the Advanced tab and see some of the more advanced options that we've got. When Metashape is doing the alignment, it's going to search through your photo and look for little contrast points that it might find in multiple photos. And the software is based on basically finding those in multiple photos and using them to sort of adjust the positions of those two photos relative to each other. The key point limit is the total number of little points that it's going to search for in each photo. So 40,000 key points means it's going to look for 40,000 and then it's going to give up. If you increase that, it's just going to take a lot longer to process. And if you decrease it, it might stop early. 40,000, the default, is a good number to work with, and I wouldn't adjust it. Tie point limit is the total number of those key points that it's going to use to tie two photos together by their location. So basically, once it's found 4,000 points in two photos that match up together, it's going to say, look, it's not worth spending more time trying to match up these photos. I've already got 4,000 points to line these photos up. And again, 4,000 is the default, and it's a good number to stick with. I use that on the majority of my projects anyways. That's something that you can play around with a little bit later, but again, I would not recommend adjusting that to start off. Then we have a couple of other options. Apply masks to, we don't want to worry about that for right now. And we have guided image matching and adaptive camera model fitting. Put really simply, guided image matching is going to help align high resolution images, which is a lot of the images that we're taking, especially if you're using a dedicated camera and not something like a phone camera. Adaptive camera model fitting is going to let Metashape consider more camera variables when it's trying to correct for distortions in your camera. So basically, if you're using a high-end camera, check guided image matching, it's going to help. And always check adaptive camera model fitting. I find that it helps pretty much 100% of the time. So again, a quick overview of the settings that I would recommend for your first model. Keep your accuracy on medium. Check generic preselection. Leave reference preselection unchecked. Keep your key point limit at 40,000. Tie point limit at 4,000. Keep apply masks to set to none if that's an option. Uncheck guided image matching unless you're using a high-end camera. And check adaptive camera model fitting. And just go ahead and do a once over on these settings before you hit OK, because your computer is going to be processing for a couple of minutes or maybe a couple of hours, depending on the software that you, or excuse me, depending on the hardware that you have available to you. OK. So once we have our photos aligned, we're going to get a sparse cloud. It's like a couple of dots in space, and you're going to get a general idea of what your 3D model looks like. John, could we actually bring up a sparse cloud real quick? Do we have one available?
Yeah, give me a second. Oh, missed.
So this is what a sparse cloud is going to look like. This is the sparse cloud here for John's moped model. And really quick, Keith has a question. If you're using a smaller mirrorless camera like a Sony A6500, would you uncheck guided image? I would check it for that. Basically, anytime you're using something better than like a phone camera, I'd probably check guided image matching, but you're always welcome to experiment a little bit. So once we've done our image alignment, we're going to have this sparse cloud. This is a pretty good one. You can start to see the shape of the moped there in a lot of the environment, but it's not a really high quality model. If you get very close, it becomes very obvious that it's just a bunch of points in space. We're going to sort of build in some information. Once we have decided to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to build a dense cloud. Basically, this is going to give Metashape a second pass at everything. The first pass is trying to figure out where the pictures were taken from. The second pass, it's going to start to build the model out a little bit better. The result of this is still going to be a cloud, not a full 3D model, but it's going to be much, much easier to recognize the object that you've created. So here we have fewer options, thankfully, a little bit easier to understand. First off, quality works the same way. Higher quality is going to produce a higher quality model at the expense of modeling time. And again, here I recommend don't go crazy. Medium is a good setting. Low is also a good setting here. If you go to the very highest settings, it's going to take forever. And the dense cloud is by far typically the longest step. So if you set this too high, it's going to be very painful. It's going to take you ages. So stick on quality low, and you can jump up to quality medium if you need to, or if you have a real beast of a computer and a relatively small model. Now, there's always going to be a couple of artifacts whenever you create a 3D model, just because the process here is not exact. So Metashape has this option built in called depth filtering. What it's going to do is sort of, I like to think of it like sandpaper. You can set it to aggressive, which is like aggressively sandpapering your model. If it's something smooth, that's going to smooth out all the little edges and make things look a lot better. However, if you're modeling something that has a lot of little protrusions, like antenna or something like that, or it has a naturally bumpy surface, taking sandpaper to it is going to remove some of the detail, and you might need to adjust the depth filtering to something like mild. Here, I would start with depth filtering on aggressive, and if you find that Metashape has sanded off details that you would like to keep, you can adjust it to something like mild. I would check calculate point colors, because that's going to make it easier to see what the dense cloud looks like. Basically, that's going to take each one of the points and colorize it, so you don't end up with sort of a gray cloud of points. You end up with a colorful cloud of points. And we can uncheck calculate point confidence. That's useful later in cleaning up the dense cloud if you need to, but for the purposes of this class, it's just going to add some processing time without a real significant benefit. And John, would you mind bringing up a dense cloud just so that we can see the difference between the sparse and the dense cloud steps here? So as we zoom in, it becomes more and more apparent that this is a cloud, but we can get almost touching the object before it looks like anything apart from a solid object. At this point with a dense cloud, you really do have a model. And eventually we're going to attach all those points together to create a proper 3D model. But to start off, and for the session tonight, the dense cloud is where we're going to, where our goal is going to be. Now, we have one more important note, and I'm going to hand it over to John for this, and that is setting your region.
Yeah. Thanks, Kees. So we mentioned in the settings that you need to decrease the transparency of your region. So your region is this crazy box thing that gets put around your model. And you need to adjust it because the region is the area into which the software will do processing. So the idea behind this is that your region dictates which area of your model will get processed on the next step. So in this case, if we processed it here, then you can see here the nose and these tails, the nose, the wings, and the tail there would all get chopped off this aircraft, so we'd get a bit of the middle of the fuselage and the middle of the wings, but without the edges. So if I show you this on my scooter model here, we can see that this box is actually quite, a long way out, and it's including some of this wall here. It's actually including part of my van over here. So what I want to do is I want to shrink my region to make it sensible for working on. So one of the options we've got up here is if you move your mouse around, it will actually pop up a little description. You can see there, resize region. It may, when you pop it up initially, say move region. So then if you use the little drop down next to it and click on resize region, and hopefully you can see that it's added like a little ball to each corner of the region. And if you then grab the ball, you can then, if you grab the ball, you can then shrink your region. So it's basically just covering the areas that you want to process. But something to be very careful of. Always after you've done that, click back onto the arrow tool, and then you can move around and just make sure from every direction that the region does actually contain the bits that you want modeling. If you set this wrong, you'll end up with models with bits missing. The number of times that both Kees and I have been in a rush somewhere on a project, you just like click a line, quickly click dense cloud, and then we get back after dinner to have a look at the dense cloud and find we've got a really nice dense cloud, or the bottom half of the thing that we were looking at, because it's just filtered off the masts or anything sticking up above or something like that. It's always a step to remember to do. Okay. Another nice thing here is the space bar. Basically, if you hit the space bar, it switches between the region tool and the select tool. The region tool and the arrow tool there, which is a nice thing. I think somebody pointed out in the last workshop that I hadn't actually found out before that. Cool. So make sure you do that before you create your dense cloud. If you don't, and you get a really beautiful dense cloud of the middle, we get a question like this pretty much every time. Can I just change the region and will it just find the edges? No, you can change the region, but then you have to reprocess that dense cloud to actually get the data back. Okay. Cool. So that leads us nicely on to tonight's homework. Obviously, you've only got kind of like a day to do this, but if it's taking longer, don't stress it. Don't worry about it. Obviously, you get a week between tomorrow's session and next weekend's session, so you can catch up during the week. And all the videos are recorded anyway, so you can re-watch them again during the week to make sure what you're doing. So the homework is: start with, go to addysoft.com and download and install the Metashape Standard Edition. You'll need to download the version that's required for your operating system. So if you're on Mac, then do the macOS version. If you're on Windows, do the Windows version. If you're on Linux, then do the Linux version. And welcome to a whole load of pain, I'm sure. I've never tried. If you're on a PC and you want to do video import, then you need to install the K-Lite codec pack, and I know that Kees has stuck those links up into the Facebook group. If you're on a PC, you need to install the OpenSSL, so do that, and then import your video if you've shot video, or import your still images. This is the insert images from the workflow menu. Then we'd like you to align your cameras. So do align cameras. Remember to set your region and then build the dense cloud. Once you've done that, stick a photo of it up onto the Facebook group and let us see how you get on.
We got
go on, Kees. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we got a really good question from Leon. It says the region in our example was set below the ground. That's what we want. Basically, the region should totally encapsulate whatever object you're trying to model. If you try to set the region so it's set directly on the ground, there's going to be some parts of the ground that are just outside the region, and so they're not going to be modeled. So think about it like cropping a photo. You don't want to just crop like directly up to the face of a person. You want to crop a little bit of the surroundings as well, with the knowledge that anything that you sort of leave outside the region is just going to be completely missing.
Cool. So yeah, obviously keep asking the questions whilst we're online. Otherwise, stick them up on Facebook. So that is kind of the end of session 2. We've had a quick look at what is GUE. We've had a look at the Metashape download, the how to set up Metashape. Remember to do those settings before you start processing. Install the K-Lite codec pack. Install the OpenSSL as necessary. We've looked at importing imagery and alignment. As always, we have our little blatant plugs. Both Kees and myself are active GUE instructors. We teach a range of GUE classes. Kees is based over in Seattle. I am in the UK, but we both are happy to travel. I'm actually getting homesick for the airport lounge in Gatwick. I haven't been in at least 8 weeks, and it's getting worrying. Please do follow us. We've both got Instagram and Facebook pages, and the YouTube channels. So the YouTube channel that we're watching this on, and also Kees has his channel. So please do subscribe to those. And please as well, if you are enjoying the online class, consider giving us a virtual beer or a virtual coffee in the form of a small tip. And there's the tips jar in the Facebook group. We do absolutely appreciate any donations that you guys send, but do not feel that you have to. We're doing this because we like it. We're doing it to spread some knowledge. It's nice, but it's not necessary. And the last thing is, we are both very passionate members of the Mars 1564 project. This is a project that is digitally reconstructing a shipwreck in the Baltic, the shipwreck of the Mars. I literally just finished talking about that for another group just before this presentation. I will send out a couple of links into the group as well, because I've got a couple more presentations this week about Mars. If you're interested in marine archaeology, then please do visit the marsproject.org website. Mars-project.org is up there. Yeah, there's some media on there, there's some other stuff, and there will be updates as and when we manage to actually go diving again, going onto the website. How are we doing on questions, Kees?
No questions. I just Robert had a question about software emulations of a GPU. I have not experimented with that, but I would be very, very surprised if that helped. Since the GPU would be emulated on the CPU, which is what Metashape is going to be using anyway. So better to take the middleman out and let it run directly on the CPU. For image sets like the ones that we've recommended for this class, 50 to 70 images, even running on sort of a lower end laptop, as long as it's been built in the last couple of years, is not going to take painfully long, meaning like you can finish your process before the morning.
Yeah, agreed. I think an emulated GPU is definitely not going to speed things up. I think that's just going to add another layer of processing that will slow things down. I saw John was asking what's the transparency setting. I tend to set mine quite low to like 10% until I've got the region set nicely, and then I'll bring it up again. It comes out as a default at 83, which makes it almost impossible to see, and then you forget to set it. So that's something to watch for. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions at the moment, thank you all for coming and watching. Thank you for joining us from where in the world you are. As I said, the video will be online on the same link that you follow to get to the stream, and we will be on the Facebook group shortly to answer any other questions.
Yeah, thank you all very much for joining us, and have fun this evening. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
Yep. And you should all have the link to tomorrow's stream in the same email that you got today's stream from. So I'm guessing it worked. Okay, thanks very much, guys. Bye.